Hello everyone, today's story is on Ruben Cantu, a man who was executed after being sentenced to death at the age of 17 for murder.
Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Ruben Cantu was born on December 5, 1966 in San Antonio, Texas. He had at least 4 siblings, and his parents Fidencio and Aurelia were a married couple living together raising their children, but when Ruben turned 14 years old, his parents split up. For whatever reason, Ruben did not live with his mother after the split. Instead, he lived with his father. Where his father was living was rough, though. They were living in a trailer and surrounded by crime. Now, Ruben was small in nature, and he struggled in school. He was unable to thrive in a general ed class, so he was put in special education classes. He was unmotivated, and the kids running the streets and committing crime appealed to him more than school did. Ruben ended up joining the Gray Eagles gang in his area, and because he was so committed to committing crime for his new group of friends, he became the gang's leader. At the age of 15, just a year after moving into the South San Antonio trailer with his dad, Ruben had upped the ante on his petty crimes and was now stealing cars for an organized auto theft ring. 15-year-old Ruben would break into a car and drive the stolen car from San Antonio to Mexico for money. States like California and Texas that border Mexico have had a long history of crime from both sides of the border. According to a government website, the South Texas portion of the U.S.-Mexico border is very rural and contains large areas of land that are uninhabited and/or sparsely populated. Because of this, it's a hot spot for drug traffickers to smuggle illicit drug shipments into the U.S. Areas like this are also used to store drug shipments before they are then transported to bigger cities. Ruben was always flying under the radar and avoiding getting caught with his car stealing business because the San Antonio Police Department was so engrossed with catching drug dealers. At the time, there were also drug dealing officers causing scandals in the area. Ruben was not the only one in his family committing crime, though. His older brother was also into committing crimes, but he was dabbling with drugs and ended up getting locked up for being in possession of drugs. Ruben was so into his gang and stealing that he decided that school was no longer for him in the 9th grade. A couple of years later, now 17 years old, Ruben and his gang mates were now breaking into homes. One evening, close to midnight on November 7, 1984, Ruben and his 15-year-old gang member friend David Garza broke into what they thought was an empty home that was under construction. Workers had been working hard day and night, so much so that sometimes the workers would fall asleep inside of the home. Well, that night, 25-year-old Pedro Gomez and 19-year-old Juan Moreno were 2 workers that had fallen asleep inside of the home. These particular workers actually stayed with the intentions of protecting the home, though, because certain expensive items had recently been stolen. Pedro and Juan were paid in cash earlier that day, but they were so dedicated to protecting their hard work that they did not even go home to change that day. Now, when Ruben and David broke into the house, they were equipped with a rifle and were not expecting anyone to be inside. When the men sleeping were spotted, Ruben and David tried to steal their money. Pedro ended up waking up and tried to reach for a pistol he had hidden under the mattress he was sleeping on. Unfortunately, Pedro was not fast enough in retrieving his weapon, and he was shot 9 times with a rifle. After killing Pedro, Juan was also shot 9 times. Of course, Ruben and David believed that Pedro and Juan were for sure dead. No one could have possibly survived 9 shots with a rifle, so they grabbed what they wanted and fled the scene. Little did they know, Juan survived the attack, and despite being severely injured, he mustered up enough strength to leave the house and call for help. To put things into perspective, Juan had lost a lung, a kidney, and part of his stomach. He struggled but was successful in getting the help he needed. When authorities arrived, they found Juan and he was transported to the hospital. Juan, although alive and in critical condition, was able to give police a description of the 2 males that attacked him and his co-worker. Investigators had no real leads and only had the description of 2 Latinos that were between the ages of 14 and 19. While authorities were busy trying to find the culprits, gossip started buzzing around South San Antonio High School. The main character of the gossip was none other than 17-year-old 9th grade student Ruben Cantu. Students were spreading the news that Ruben was a thief and a killer. Eventually, the gossip spread to a shop teacher. Unlike the students, though, this teacher reported what was being said about Ruben. He claimed that students told him that Ruben was involved in a robbery and a murder. Police now had the information of what was being spread at the high school, so they decided to bring David and Ruben in for questioning. When David was questioned, though, he had no issues ratting on his friend and gang leader Ruben. He was quoted saying, "I saw Ruben come running out of the house." Although David did not admit to helping Ruben commit the fatal crimes on November 7th, he did admit to being outside of the house when the murder and attempted murder occurred. When Ruben was questioned, he did not admit to anything. In fact, he denied taking part in any robbery or murder. Despite there being no physical evidence, David and Ruben were indicted on murder charges. During trial, Juan was the key witness and Ruben's nail in the coffin because he identified Ruben as the one who shot him and his co-worker. Ruben was found guilty of first-degree murder and he was sentenced to death. When Ruben was sentenced, he penned a letter to the people of San Antonio. "My name is Ruben M. Cantu, and I am only 18 years old. I got to the 9th grade, and I have been framed in a capital murder case." Ruben Cantu was scheduled to die on August 24, 1993. A month before his execution, his co-defendant, David Garza, contacted Ruben's lawyers with a written letter. At the time, David was also in prison, but for charges unrelated to the murder of Pedro Gomez. David's letter read, "This case with Ruben is real messed up. Hope to hear from you real soon." He offered no other words, and there was no follow-up. With his letter being so unclear, the lawyers did not reply. When it was time for Ruben's lethal injection execution, Texas was no longer offering last meals. Despite the rule, Ruben still requested to have one final piece of bubble gum, but the prison denied his request. Ruben offered no final words before being executed at the age of 26. Now, years after Ruben was executed, word started to spread about his innocence. His mother, who had spoken to Ruben while he was on death row, always expressed that her son was innocent because that is what he told her and he would never lie to her. David Garza then came out and signed an affidavit saying that Ruben Cantu was innocent and he allowed his friend to be accused even though he knew Ruben was not with him the night of the murder. David said that he did participate in the robbery of Pedro and Juan and he witnessed the murder, but the killer was a different friend, not Ruben. On top of David admitting that Ruben had nothing to do with the murder, the surviving victim, Juan Moreno, also came out and said that Ruben was innocent and he was forced to ID Ruben by police officers. According to police officers, Ruben got away with shooting a police officer in the past. Sergeant Bill Ewell was quoted saying, "Ruben shot an officer who worked with me. It was difficult to get the witness to make an identification. We weren't able to get him for the police shooting, but we were able to get him for the murder." Sergeant Bill was in charge of the investigation of the murder of Pedro Gomez, and he really wanted Ruben convicted of a crime. He was upset that the barroom shooting Ruben was involved in was dropped due to police tainting evidence and illegally searching Ruben's home. He said the force would not mess up twice. Getting back to surviving witness Juan Moreno, he was an illegal immigrant who was scared of being deported if he did not ID Ruben. He claimed that he was in a horrible state after being shot multiple times with a rifle, and police kept questioning him. Police went to visit him several times in the hospital within a week, showing him photo lineups, some including Ruben and some without Ruben's picture. Initially, Ruben, who lived right across the street from the house that was under construction, was not identified by Juan. The case went cold for a few months, and that is when off-duty officer Joe de la Luz was shot, but the case was thrown out for the reasons I previously mentioned. Because the police had a positive ID of Ruben for this shooting, Sergeant Bill decided to reopen the Pedro Gomez murder case and picked Ruben as his #1 suspect. Sergeant Bill sent over an investigator to show Juan another photo lineup with Ruben's photo included. Again, Juan did not identify Ruben. This happened a third time, and Juan said he felt pressure to choose Ruben because at that time he had been given information about Ruben shooting an officer. Juan was now admitting that he did the wrong thing and falsely identifying Ruben as the shooter because the person who shot him looked nothing like Ruben. Although Ruben's mother Aurelia was heartbroken that her son was executed, when she knew in her heart he was innocent, she still had forgiveness in her heart. She would visit the prison Ruben was held at before his execution to speak with other inmates. She did that because it helped her cope with Ruben's death. She was quoted saying, "I miss him so much. It's not right that innocent people are killed that didn't even do anything. It is unfortunate when justice is not always served. I once told a story on my Patreon that is not public on YouTube about me being held at gunpoint in a robbery when I was a teen, and an investigator told me that I had no choice but to pick someone from the lineup, even though I said the person who committed the crime was not in the lineup. I was told there would be a warrant out for my arrest if I did not choose someone or didn't testify. Mind you, I was scared and home alone, and this detective did not care. I was forced into picking someone. I did end up circling someone, but I also wrote down in my own handwriting that I was being forced to choose someone, but the person that I was circling was not the person that held me at gunpoint. Of course, when trial came around, the original copy was thrown out and they forged a new paper without my writing on the lineup. So I know it can be scary that you are the only witness at times, and although I can somewhat understand their surviving victim Juan, it does suck that he only admitted to the truth after Ruben died. That's not fair that someone had to be executed before he told the truth. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Do you think Sergeant Bill or anyone else involved in the case should be prosecuted? Also, if you do believe in the death penalty, do you believe people should be sentenced to death without any physical evidence or proof? Is it okay that they're sentenced to death just with eyewitness testimony? Thank you all for watching another episode of Death Row Executions, and I look forward to reading your comments.